epistle. It's really a heavy book. I'm glad for this podium to put it on. But this is what it looks like. It says The Most of Nora Ephron. And it is practically everything that she wrote, but not quite everything. Um, Nora, I went to Google and well, it had reams, of course, but the important thing is she was born in 1941. Her parents were playwrights, and so they moved from New York to California when she was little. And let's see, she went to Wellesley College. She was married 3 times. The second time, she was married briefly to Carl Bernstein, who was Woodward and Bernstein of Watergate fame. And he broke her heart, by the way, and she wrote a novel called Heartburn that was turned into a movie. It's good. There, let's see, she died in 2012 of leukemia at age 71. Um, there are a lot of interesting things and things that would I could tell you about her that would maybe enlighten us a little bit about this book. But what is that noise? A colleague of hers, Robert Gottlieb, wrote the introduction to this book, and he does such a beautiful job that I'm going to read part of that. A couple of years before Nora's death in 2012, she and I sat down to begin putting together the table of contents for this book. Then other things got in the way. Her play, Lucky Guy, a movie script she was working on, and so it was set aside. Perhaps, too, knowing how ill she was, she began to see the book as a memorial, and that made her uncomfortable. She never said that, though. But although I was aware of her dire medical situation, the original impulse behind this book was not to memorialize, but to celebrate the richness of her work, the amazing arc of her career, and the place she had come to hold in the hearts of so many readers. The reaction to her death was an outpouring of disbelief and grief. As a matter of fact, I remember when she died, and I could not believe that somebody so young had died. Before the publication of her 2 collections, I Feel Bad About My Neck, and I Remember Nothing, she was, of course, admired and enjoyed for both her writing and her movies. But the readership of those last books seemed to me to be on another level entirely. It was personal. Her readers not only felt that they knew her, but that she knew them. Obviously, not all the people, more than 1 million of them, however, who bought Neck were women who identified with her and sensed her identification with them. But certainly many of them were connected to her. She had become a model, an ideal, or at the very least, an example. She was telling them things about herself that were also about them and giving them permission to think these things and feel these things. And she was also telling them what to look for in the coming years. Her honesty and directness and her unerring presence made her a figure, someone whose influence and authority transcended her individual achievements, and extraordinary as her works were. In her later years, her movies brought her tremendous response and rewards, both for their quality and because she was the first woman of her time to become a successful commercial film director. How did she do that? By her talent, naturally, her uncanny ability to give us romance as seen through a gimlet eye. Some people complained that her movies were sentimental. You know, all those happy endings. But those happy endings were actually realistic. She had lived them herself through her long third marriage, one of the happiest marriages I've ever witnessed. The determination and persistence and clarity that saw her prevail in Hollywood were the qualities that earlier had propelled her to the heights of journalism, first as a reporter, then as an outspoken commentator. Her abiding principle was the reality principle. And of course, she had a not so secret weapon. She was funny. She was funny even when she was furious. Funny through thick and, as we know from heartburn, thin. And she was openly and generously personal without being egotistical. She saw everything wirely, including herself. And she also looked great. This book is structured around the many genre and subjects she explores and conquers. As you'll see, it's autobiographical, sociological, and political. It adds up to a portrait of a writer, a log of a writer's career, and an unofficial and unintended report on feminism in her time. She's a reporter, a novelist, a screenwriter, a playwright, and a wicked blogger. Blogging came along just in time for her to latch on to it fiercely. What was she like in real life? To begin with, she was a perfect spouse. She and her Nick could have given lessons to that earlier exemplary Nick and Nora, the third man and the third man's lady. She adored her two boys and nobly tried not to micromanage them, a real sacrifice. Managing things was one of her supreme talents and pleasures. She was a fanatical friend, always there for anyone who needed support, encouragement, or kindness. She was also, I can report, a wonderfully responsive colleague. We worked together on all her books after her first collection, which was called Wallflower at the Orgy, without a single moment of contention. As a result, I think I know what she would have wanted this book to be, and her family allowed me to shape it. My immediate reward was having a professional excuse to reread everything she ever wrote. No other editorial job I've ever performed has ever been so much fun. So, the best way, let's go and read, and if I can find it, see what she says about her life. I forgot to mark this, the bad girl. Here I am. This is a little essay about her life. The story of my life in 3,500 words or less. Now, these are short paragraphs, and each paragraph has a little title to it. If I can just get back to New York, I'll be fine. I'm 5 years old. We've just moved from New York to Los Angeles, and I'm outside at a playground at my new school in Beverly Hills. The sunlight dapples through the trees, and happy, laughing, blonde children surround me. All I can think is, what am I doing here? What my mother said. My mother says these words at least 500 times in the course of my growing up. Everything is copy. She also says, never, ever by a red coat. What my teacher says. My high school journalism teacher, whose name is Charles O. Sims, is teaching us to write a lead, the first sentence or paragraph in a newspaper story. He writes the words who, what, where, when, why, and how on the blackboard. Then he dictates a set of facts to us that go something like this. Kenneth I. Peters, the principal of Beverly Hills High School, announced today that the faculty of the high school will travel to Sacramento on Thursday for a conference on new teaching methods. Speaking there will be anthropologist Margaret Mead and Robert Maynard Hutchins, the president of the University of Chicago. We all sit in front of our typewriters and write a lead. Most of us just inverting the set of facts so that they read something like this. Anthropologist Margaret Mead and University of Chicago president Robert Maynard Hutchins will address the faculty Thursday in Sacramento at a conference on new teaching methods. The principal of the high school, Kenneth I. Peters, announced today. We turn in our leads. We're very proud. Mr. Sims looks at what we have done, and then he tosses everything in the garbage. He says, the lead to this story is there will be no school on Thursday. At that moment, an electric light bulb turns itself on in the balloon over my head. I decide at that moment that I am going to be a journalist. A few months later, I enter a citywide competition to write an essay in 50 words or less of why I want to be a journalist. I win first prize, 2 tickets to the world premiere of a Doris Day movie. I swear to God, Janice Globman will never laugh at me again. I go off to college. I weigh 106 pounds. I come back from college 3 months later. I weigh 126 pounds. I was once thin and shapeless. Now I'm fat and ironically shapeless. Nothing fits except my wool plaid Pendleton pleated skirt, which makes me look even fatter. It's tragic. My father takes one look at me as I get off the plane and says to my mother, well, maybe someone will marry her for her personality. I go back to college. I stay fat. There's a machine in the dormitory cafeteria called the cow. And when you press a nozzle, out comes the coldest, most delicious milk you ever tasted. Also, there are sticky buns and popovers and scones. I have never been exposed to such wonders. I love them. I have seconds. I have thirds. There's butter everywhere I look, and of course, that cold, delicious milk. We're not talking low fat milk, my friends. This was long ago when no one knew what low fat milk was. Anyway, months pass. I come home for the summer. I'm as fat as ever. None of my clothes fit. I know I've already said that, but it's still true. And because it's summer, I can't even wear my wool plaid Pendleton pleated skirt. So I go over to my friend Janice Glubman to borrow some clothes from her. Janice has always been overweight. I try on a pair of her pants. They're too small. They are way too small. I can't even zip them up. Janice laughs at me. These are Janice's exact words. Ha ha, ha ha ha. The next day, I go on a diet. In 6 months, my weight drops back to 106. I have been on a diet ever since. I have not seen Janice for more than 40 years. But if I do see her, I'm ready. I'm thin, although I now weigh 126 pounds, the exact amount I weighed when I came home from college, having become a butterball. I can't explain this. I am not going to marry Stanley J. Flick. I'm working as a summer intern in the Kennedy White House, and I'm engaged to be married to a young lawyer named Stanley J. Flick. Everybody I know is engaged to be married. My fiance is visiting me in Washington, and I give him a tour of the White House, which I have a pass to roam freely in. I show him the red room, I show him the blue room, and I show him the beautiful portrait of Grace Coolidge, and I show him the rose garden. At the end of the tour, he says, "No wife of mine is ever going to work at a place like this." Sunday in the park. I'm in a rowboat on the lake in Central Park. Fortunately, I'm not rowing the boat. I'm still in college, but soon I won't be. Soon I'll be living here in New York City. I look up at all the buildings surrounding the park, and it crosses my mind that except for the man rowing the boat, I don't know anyone in New York City. And I barely know the man rowing the boat. I wonder if I'm going to end up being one of those people you read about in the newspapers who lives in New York and never meets anyone and eventually dies, and no one even notices until days later when the smell drifts out into the hallway. I vow that someday I will know someone in New York City. I'm going to be a newspaper reporter forever. It's 1963. I've written a piece for a parody of the New York Post during a long newspaper strike. The editors of the Post are upset about the parody, but the publishers of the Post is amused. If they can write a parody of the Post, they can write for it. She says, hire them. When the strike ends, I'm giving a 1-week tryout at the Post. The city room is dusty, dingy, and dark. The desks are dilapidated and falling apart. It smells terrible. There aren't enough phones. The city editor sends me to the Coney Island Aquarium to cover the story of two hooded seals who've been brought together to mate but have refused to have anything to do with each other. I write a story. This I think it's funny. I turn it in. I hear laughter from the city desk. They think it's funny too. I'm hired permanently. I have never been happier. I have achieved my life's ambition, and I am 22 years old. I may not be a newspaper reporter forever. One night, I go to a bar near the Post with one of my fellow reporters and the managing editor. It's been raining. After quite a few drinks, the managing editor invites us to his home in Brooklyn Heights. When we get there, he tells me to stand on the stoop in front of the house. There's an awning over one of the windows. As I step into position, he lowers the awning, and about 10 gallons of water drench me from head to toe. He thinks this is hilarious. My life changes. I write a magazine article about having small breasts. I am now a writer. What my mother said, number two. I now believe what my mother meant when she said everything is copy is this. When you slip on a banana peel, people laugh at you. But when you tell people you slip on a banana peel, it's your laugh. So you become the hero rather than the victim of the joke. I think that's what she meant. On the other hand, she may have meant merely that everything is copy. When she was in the hospital dying, she said to me, "You're a reporter, Nora. Take notes." It seems to me that this is not quite the same as everything is copy. My mother died of cirrhosis, but the immediate cause of her death was an overdose of sleeping pills administered by my father. At the time, this didn't seem to me to fall under the topic of everything is copy, although it did to my sister Amy, and she put it in a novel, and who can blame her? How She Died, my version. My mother is in the hospital. Every day, my father calls and says, "This is it, they're pulling the plug." But there's no plug. My mother comes home. Several days pass. One day, my father says, "I'm going to give the nurse the night off." Late that night, he calls to tell me my mother has died. The funeral home has already come and taken away her body. I go to their apartment. It's 4 in the morning. I sit with my father for a while, and then we both decide to take a nap before the next day begins. My father reaches into the pocket of his bathrobe and pulls out a bottle of sleeping pills. The doctor gave me these in case I was having trouble sleeping, he said. Flush them down the toilet. I go into the bathroom and flush them down the toilet. The next morning, when my sisters arrive, I tell them about the pills. My sister Amy said to me, "Did you count the pills?" "No," I said. "Duh," she says. I was married to him for 6 years. My first husband is a perfectly nice person, although he's pathologically attached to his cats. It's 1972, the height of the women's movement, and everybody is getting a divorce, even people whose husbands don't have a pathological attachment to their cats. My husband is planning for us to take a photo safari through Africa. And I say to him, "I can't go on this trip." "Why not?" he says. "Because it's very expensive and we're probably going to split up, and I'll feel horribly guilty that you spent all that money taking me to Africa." "Don't be crazy," my husband says. "I love you and you love me, and we're not getting a divorce. And even if we do, you're the only person I want to go to Africa with. We're going." So we went to Africa. It was a wonderful trip. When we came back, I tell my husband that I want a divorce. "But I took you to Africa," he says. You can't make this stuff up. I'm working on a magazine story about a woman who was fired from her job as president of Bennington College. I've read a story about her in the New York Times that says she's been fired along with her husband, the vice president of Bennington, because of her brave stand against tenure. I suspect her firing had nothing to do with her brave stand against tenure, although I don't have a clue as to what the real reason is. So I go to Bennington and I discover that she has, in fact, been fired because she is having an affair with a professor at Bennington, that they taught a class on Hawthorne together, and that they both wore matching t shirts in class with scarlet A's on them. What's more, I learned that the faculty hated her from the very beginning because she had a party for them and served them lukewarm lasagna and unthawed Sara Lee banana cake. I can't get over this aspect of journalism. I can't believe how real life never lets you down. I can't understand why anyone would write fiction when what actually happens is so amazing. Everything is copy. I'm 7 months pregnant with my second child, and I've just discovered that my second husband is in love with someone else. She is married too. Her husband telephones me. He's the British ambassador to the United States. I'm not kidding. He happened to be the kind of person who tends to see almost everything in global terms. He suggests lunch. We meet outside a Chinese restaurant on Connecticut Avenue and fall into each other's arms, weeping. Oh, Peter, I say to him, isn't it awful? It's awful, he says. What's happening to this country? I'm crying hysterically, but I'm thinking someday this will be a funny story. I was married to him for 2 years and 8 months. I fly to New York to see my shrink. I walk into her office and burst into tears. I tell her what my husband has done to me. I tell her my heart is broken. I tell her I'm a total mess and I will never be the same. I can't stop crying. She looks at me and says, you have to understand something. You were going to leave him eventually. On the other hand, perhaps you can make this stuff up. So I wrote a novel. I changed my first husband's cats to hamsters, and I changed the British ambassador into an undersecretary of state, and I gave my second husband a beard. One of the saddest things about divorce. My sister Delia said this, and it's true. When we were growing up, we used to love to hear stories of how our parents met and fell in love and eloped one summer when they were both counselors. It was so much a part of our lives, a song sung again and again. And no matter what happened, no matter how awful things became between the two of them, we always knew that our parents had once been madly in love. But in a divorce, you never tell your children that you were once madly in love with their father because it would be too confusing. And then, after a while, you can't even remember whether you were. From my script for When Harry Met Sally. Harry, why don't you tell me the story of your life? Sally, the story of my life? Harry, we've got 18 hours to kill before we hit New York. Sally, well, the story of my life isn't even going to get us out of Chicago. I mean, nothing's happened to me yet. That's why I'm going to New York. Harry, so something can happen to you? Sally, yes. Like what? Like I'm going to go to journalism school and become a reporter. Harry, so you can write about things that happen to other people. Sally, after a beat, well, I guess that's one way to look at it. Harry, suppose nothing happens to you. Suppose you live there your whole life and nothing happens. You never meet anyone, you never become anything, and finally you die one of those New York deaths where nobody notices for 2 weeks until the smell drifts out into the hallway. A guy walks into a restaurant. I'm having dinner in a restaurant with friends. A man I know comes over to the table. He's a famously nice guy. His marriage broke up about the same time mine did. He says, "How can I find you?" We can't do everything. I'm sitting in a small screening room waiting for the movie to begin. The room fills up. There aren't enough seats. People are bunching up in the aisles and looking around helplessly. I'm next to my friend Bob Gottlieb watching all of this. The director of the movie decides to solve the problem by asking all the children at the screening to share seats. I'm watching mounting frustration. Finally, I say to Bob, "It's really very simple. Someone should go get some folding chairs and set them up in the aisles." Bob looks at me. "Nora," he says, "we can't do everything." My brain clears in an amazing way. Nora, we can't do everything. I have been given the secret of life, although it's probably a little late. And by the way, the other day, I bought a red coat on sale, but I haven't worn it yet. There's a cute picture of her. That's it. Unless you want me to read something else. There's a wonderful thing about hair dye here that someday I'm going to read to y'all. You all may go. You're dismissed. Oh, you want to hear? It really is funny, and it's one of those jokes like the banana peel, because I dye my hair so I can read it. It's really hilarious. Next time.